working with quadratic formula. So this is solving. So this will always be solving quadratics, not factoring like we've been doing the last 2 days. So this is the solving. The last 2 days we've been factoring and then setting the factors equal to 0 to solve. And you solve to find your zeros, your x-intercepts, solutions, or roots. All of those words means we're trying to solve this quadratic equation. So the quadratic formula is negative b, so opposite b, plus or minus the square root, all underneath that root bar, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. And that's in relation to the standard form. Remember, this is our standard form of a quadratic. So that's where you're going to get your a, your b, and your c from, which we've also been doing as we've been factoring. So this is just skipping the factor part and going straight to solution, but using a formula. So the first one we're going to look at is x squared minus 18x plus 32. So we need to identify our a. So our a would be right here in the front. And in this case, a is equal to 1. Our b value is always the second. It's the coefficient of x. So b is equal to a negative 18. And then our c value is going to be our constant. So c is equal to 32 in this case. Now, the reason we have to use quadratic formula to solve, there is not necessarily always going to be a set of factors or terms that will multiply to give us 32 and add or subtract to give us 18. So we multiply to give us AC or C, and then add or subtract to give us B. So in that case, we just have to use quadratic formula or graph it in Desmos or one of your graphing calculators to find our solutions there as well. So opposite of b, so negative 18, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 18 squared, minus 4 times a, which we know our a value is 1, and then our a value goes on the bottom to 2a, and then c, so 32. So negative b, opposite b, and then from there, we're just going to, I would be very careful trying to put in this in your calculator all at one time, unless you're really good with parentheses and such things of that nature. So I'm going to show it to you like step by step. So negative 18, the opposite of negative 18 is going to be a positive 18. So plus or minus the square root, b squared, so negative 18 squared. Be careful if you type that in the calculator, that if you don't use parentheses, when you square it, it's going to tell you it's a negative, but we know that a negative times a negative is a positive. So it's going to be 324, and then minus 4 times 1 times 32. So negative 4 times 32, basically, right? So minus 128, all over 2 times 1. 324 minus 128, so give me 196. So it's 18 plus or minus 196 all over 2. Now, I would try to see if you can do a square root of 196 and get a nice neat number, which we can. That's 14. So it's 18 plus or minus 14 over 2. That plus or minus means we now have to do this twice, one time with addition and one time with subtraction. So 18 plus 14 divided by 2, and then 18 minus 14 divided by 2. And we are solving for our x values at this point. So x equals. So 18 plus 14 is going to give us 32. Divide that by 2, we're going to get 16. 18 minus 14 gives us 4 divided by 2, which gives us 2. So our solution set is 2 and 16. You can plug that back in to try it. So 2 squared minus 18 times 2 plus 32 equals 0. Because again, your solutions, x-intercepts, roots, and zeros, x-intercept is saying that when this value is x, the y value is 0. So when we plug it in, we should end up with a 0. So 2 squared is 4 minus 36 plus 32 equals 0. Negative 36, and I made a 34, sorry, plus 32. So that's 4 minus 4 equals 0. It does indeed. 0 is 0. So great job on that one. 16 squared minus 18 times 16 plus 32 equals 0. So 16 squared is going to give us 256. Negative 18 times 16 is going to give me a negative 288, and then I have plus 32. So 256 plus 32 to get our positive is 288. So that is, again, going to give us 0. So then 16 works as well. So our final solution is 2 and 16. Just as when we graphed these prior in our Desmos, that means that this quadratic is going to touch the x-axis at a positive 2 and a positive 16. A positive 2 and a positive 16. All right, next example. Whoops, slid back at me. So our A value and our C value in B. So C is our constant, so it's always 4. It's the number without the variable. So it's not always 4. It's always the number without a variable. Our B value in this case is going to be 7. So it's the coefficient of x, always our B value. And then our A value is the number that's attached to our x squared. So it's going to be 3. So the equation is the opposite of B. So 7 plus or minus the square root B squared minus 4A. Whoops, I messed that up. Sorry, C, 4AC. I jumped the gun. I was excited about the pink pen, I think, maybe. 4AC, so 3 is going to go here. And then 2 times A, which is 3. And then we're just going to work through this guy. So negative 7 plus or minus 7 squared is 49. Negative 4 times 3 is a negative 12. And then negative 12 times 4 is going to give us 48. So negative 48 all over 6. 49 minus 48 is going to be negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 1 all over 6. The square root of 1 is 1 because 1 times 1 gives me 1. So it's negative 7 plus or minus 1 over 6. That plus or minus means, again, we're going to do it twice. You have to do it with a plus, so negative 7 plus 1 over 6. Negative 7 minus 1 over 6. Negative 7 plus 1 is going to be 8 over 6, which we do want to reduce always. 4 over 3. And then this is going to be a, oh, I totally messed up. That's a negative 6 over 6. Negative 7 plus 1 is a negative 6 over 6, which is going to give us a negative 1 for our answer on this side. Now we have our 8, but it's negative divided by 6, so negative 4 over 3. So our solution set is a negative 1 and negative 4 over 3. We can plug those in again and check them and make sure they work, and or put your equation into Desmos and see that that is where they cross the x-axis. All right, those two are correct. Again, our A value is in the front. It's going to be 12. Our B value, oh, I already got C in my hand. B value is negative 13. Our C value is not a negative 3. Pay attention. Look, that equal marks is the wrong place. So this guy has to come over here because it always has to be equal to 0. So that means it's going to be a positive 3 for my C value. When it switches over the equal marks, we're doing the inverse. And we're moving it all the way over. So it has to be in standard form. So set equal to 0 before you can pull your A, your B, and your C. So in this case, our B is a negative 13. Negative 13. Opposite B plus or minus square root. B squared minus 4A. And then C. And again, that C is a positive 3, not a negative 3, because we have an equal marks right there. That's not plus or minus. That's equals. And we have to move it. And then all over to A. So 13 times 13 is going to give me 169. It's a negative times a negative. I mean, negative and a negative. Not, wow, sorry. It's getting late, guys. I apologize. So we are going to do opposite. So it's going to get 13 plus or minus. Now we're going to square 13. 169 minus 4 times 12, which will be 48. And 48 times 3. It's going to give me 144. And 2 times 12 is going to give me 24. 169 minus 144 will give me 25. So I have 13 plus or minus the square root of 25 all over 24. The square root of 25 is 5. So it's going to be 13 plus or minus 5 over 24. We're going to work it twice. Once for the plus, once for the minus. So 13 plus 5 over 24. 13 minus 5 over 24. 13 plus 5 is going to be 18 over 24. 13 minus 5 is going to be 8 over 24. And so 18 over 24, you want to reduce it if you can. And that's going to give us 3 over 4 because it's both divisible by 6. 8 does go into 24 3 times, so we can say 1/3. So our solutions is going to be 1/3 and 3/4. And you can turn this into decimals and plug them in if you want, or again, go graph it in Desmos and see if it crosses the line at that place. All right. Some more. This one is equal to 0, so we're good to go there. So we don't need to move anything. Our constant's perfectly fine where it is. So we're going to look for our A value. So A is 8. It's for A, C, and 2A. Our B value is a positive 6. So we're going to 6 and 6. Negative B plus or minus the square root B squared. And then our C value is 1. So that goes right there. Opposite of 6 is going to be negative 6 plus or minus the square root. 6 squared is 36. And then we're going to multiply negative 4 times 8 times 1, which is going to give me 32, all over 16. So negative 6 plus or minus 36 minus 32 is going to be 4, all over 16. Hopefully you know by now that the square root of 4 is going to be 2. So it's going to be negative 6 plus or minus a positive 2 over 16. So the plus or minus, we're going to do it twice. Negative 6 plus 2 over 16. Negative 6 minus 2 over 16. Negative 6 plus 2 is going to give me a negative 4 all over 16. We do want to reduce. 4 does go into 16 4 times, and it goes into itself 1 time. So it's a negative 1/4. We can start our list. Negative 1/4. 6 minus 2 is going to give me 8 over 16. Again, let's reduce it. 8 does divide into 16, so 8 goes into itself 1 time, and then twice for the 16, so negative 1/2. And those should be our solutions for that guy. Last example, guys. So again, you need to know what your A is. Our A is 2. Our B is negative 8. And our C is a negative 13. So A, negative B, so we're going to take our 8. It's negative 8. B squared, negative 8 squared. Again, plug this in the calculator and make sure you're using parentheses. Because if not, your calculator is going to tell you a negative 8 times a negative 8 is a negative number when it's squared like that without the parentheses. And we know that a negative times a negative is a positive. So it's 4AC, so we have 13. And that's a negative 13. Our A value is 2. And then 2 times A, so 2. We're going to take our opposite. So our negative 8 becomes a positive, plus or minus. The square root, 8 times 8 is 64. Negative times a negative gives me positive. Negative 4 times 2 is going to be a negative 8. And then a negative 8 times a negative 13 is going to give me a positive 104. Because a negative times a positive is a negative, times a negative is a positive. Yep, negative is a positive. All over 4. So it's going to be 8 plus or minus the square root of 168 all over 4. We're going to check and see if 168 gives us a nice, neat little number. It does not. It gives us a decimal. So since it gives a decimal, at this point, I would use your calculator. 8 plus the square root of 168 all over 4. 8 minus the square root of 168 over 4. And you can type it in just like that in Desmos, or you can type it in just like that in your TI-80s. So it's going to be 8 plus the square root of 168, and then divide that by 4. So that's 5.24. And that just helps you be as accurate as possible and not accidentally round incorrectly. So 8, and you can do it with parentheses, 8 minus the square root of 168. Whoops. I want to go outside. There we go. Divided by 4. And so we have a negative 1.24. And that's our solution, guys. So the biggest thing is to memorize the quadratic formula. That's negative b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. The video linked below is a really obnoxiously brain-numbing song, but if you listen to it a couple of times, I promise you will learn the formula without having to study. Great job, guys.